All right. So welcome to the SMART Goals and Metrics Development Workshop. We're really excited to have you here. First of all, congratulations on being Energizing Rural Communities winner. That's a very exciting win to have. And I just mentioned I grew up in a town with 3,500 people, so I'm very excited for you. I would like to get a solar farm in my hometown. So welcome to this. As many of you probably know, this workshop was developed when NREL asked people what kind of things they would like to learn about. So they put together a whole series of different trainings, and this was one of them. And we're going to get everybody to introduce themselves shortly, but for now we have a couple important messages on the next slide. So as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, which is great, so that later you can go ahead and watch the whole thing if you'd like again. We are going to have discussion breaks throughout the presentation, so we'll do 4 or 5 slides or a little bit more, and then we'll stop and see if there are any questions or comments and talk about that. We want to ask that you come off mute during those breaks and type in that, but throughout the entire session, if you have questions or comments, just put them in the chat at any time. And like I said, I will try to be observant of those, but I'll be happy if somebody would point out if I miss one. And so now we do have a representative from NREL who's here, who's going to introduce herself. So Emily, if you just go ahead.
Yeah. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Emily Benson, and I am part of the Energizing Rural Communities Prize Administration team here at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL for short. Today's meeting is a part of a series of virtual trainings for the Energizing Rural Communities Prize. As Crystal highlighted, this training will be recorded and on the Energizing Rural Communities calendar, but I'm going to drop that in the link today so you can find more details for this specific event, as well as register for upcoming events and view recordings from past trainings on our webpage. Now, today's training is about SMART goals and metrics development, and I am happy to pass it off to Crystal Myers to introduce herself and the Deloitte team. Thank you guys so much for having this webinar series.
Oh, we're really pleased to do it. So anyway, yes, again, I'm Crystal Myers. You will not see a whole lot of me because we have 2 subject matter experts on SMART goals and logic models that are going to be talking quite a bit. But I get the honor of introducing myself. As I said, I'm from a town of 3,500 people, small town called Littlestown, close to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And I just mentioned, I actually helped my brother get started to get a solar farm on his property in Pennsylvania, and another small town in northern Pennsylvania. It's not actually built yet. We're underway. So I've experienced some of the things that you have, but not through NREL. So very pleased to be able to mention that. So Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Fogarty. I work at Deloitte. I come from a grants management background, so we'll be talking today about concepts I'm very familiar with, both being on the other side of it and now helping people do it themselves. Personally, I have solar on my roof, and I studied energy policy in graduate school, so I'm very excited to be here and helping you all out today. I'll kick it to Emily Fletcher.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Crystal. Hi, everybody. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Emily Fletcher. I'm also with the Deloitte team today. Similar to Ryan, I have a background in grants management and program evaluation. I spent a number of years at the Department of Transportation doing program evaluations and metrics development and performance management, as well as some grants management there. So I have a lot of experience building logic models, setting KPIs, doing some of the things that we'll be working on today. And yeah, really excited to get into the content and be here with you all today.
And then we have Milani, who's...
Hi, everyone. My name is Milani. I'm also part of the Deloitte team, and I'll be helping facilitate some of today's session. My background's in civil and environmental engineering, so primarily energy and water, and I'm excited to help out here today. I've done some other DOE and NREL work, so really excited to hear about this program.
Oh,
And do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi all, my name's Ann Canavati. I'm a manager with Deloitte in our energy, climate, and natural resources practice. Lovely to see some familiar faces. Hey, Heather, as well as others who joined our first 2 workshops. And so I'll just be hanging out in the background to help answer questions and help with any facilitation. Thanks all for joining.
And we are going to have all of you introduce yourselves shortly, but we wanted to just get through some of this introductory slides and then we'll do that. Maybe some more people will join in the meantime. So we're going to go forward and talk about the purpose of this workshop is, well, we've got 3 different purposes. The first one includes quite a few. So we're going to communicate the importance of establishing performance metrics as part of project planning. And I just want to reinforce something we've heard. You are not required to do the logic models that we will be talking about, but they are a very valuable planning tool. So we're going to communicate how to establish performance measures through those and make sure and talk about making sure those measurements are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely or SMART. So Ryan, I took that away from you, but it's right there. We're going to provide methods for collecting and reporting on the measures, and we're going to review a case study and use your prize recipient examples to discuss these principles so you can put them into action. And then moving on to our objectives, we want to increase your understanding of how to establish performance measures, where improvements, you might see where you can make improvements in your performance measures based on what we're talking about today. Again, collecting approaches for collecting and reporting on the measures. We're going to do a deep dive into some examples and lessons learned, provide some tactical and strategic information that can be used to increase the likelihood of your success on this with your particular project in your community. And then what we think very important, facilitate peer-to-peer discussion and idea sharing. So some of you, as Ann mentioned, have been on a couple of these, so you might be getting to know each other already, but there's a lot that you can learn from each other. So we're hoping that you get to know each other and will lead to discussions beyond this. And so in terms of the agenda, we've got a pretty weighty agenda after we get through these introductions and overviews. We have 4 modules. The first one is about establishing goals, where we talk about SMART goals and key performance indicators, and we'll look at a case study and see if we can't make those goals and those KPIs smarter and talk about how to measure them. In module 2, we're going to look at a logic model, really take it apart, explain all the parts, and then we're going to take that same case study and we're going to work with you in just to practice to take that case study and put it into a logic model. And Emily's going to talk to us about the benefits and the leading practices and tips for working on logic models. Then for module 3, that's where we're going to break into groups, and we have an exercise where you can either decide that you want to take your project and we put it into a logic model, or your group does, or you can create your own from a menu of items to just create a different project and create a logic model. And then the group's going to talk about lessons learned from that, and we'll get back and have a plenary where people can discuss what they learned from putting together that logic model. And then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways and next steps. And that will be your afternoon, hopefully very productive for you. And then, so now we would like to go ahead and have group introductions. So you could tell us your name, what organization you're from, what community that is, what your prize team is, what you're doing as that as a prize, and then something we thought we'd just talk about, what part of your profession do you find most rewarding? Or you could talk about what you think is most rewarding about this project too. We're not going to tie you to that exactly. So and I'm seeing Heather, so I'm going to call on Heather. How's that to start?
Hi there, and I also have David Dunaway here. We're just kind of sharing a workstation today. So our organization is actually the Distributed Wind Energy Association, and our project is the Ag Wind Qualifiers team. I put a link in the chat. We are helping launch this effort, starting with a pilot in coastal Texas. And we are working with a local nonprofit, the Texas Energy Poverty Institute, that is helping to reduce energy burdens. And we're primarily looking at rural and remote property owners, energy users, to help screen their sites to see if they're adequate for wind energy, either grid connected or off grid, and what their eligibility might be for incentives, and then what the payback would be for the purchasers of the wind turbines, whether those are the property owners or third parties. So we're really excited to have this project, and I'm sorry that we weren't really able to, we will only be able to participate for the first hour today. But we look forward to coming back to all the resources, and hopefully the output from the group exercises will be able to be shared.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to have people annotate, and we'll have that
Super.
copy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
David, you want to?
Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, my name's David, he, him, traditional Squally lands. I just wanted to add at the end, because Heather kind of covered everything. The part of the profession I find most rewarding is working with technology and applying that to making these kinds of projects.
Thank you.
And that was a ditto from Heather. Right. Griffin?
And the people
Yeah.
too. I find the people most rewarding.
I can understand that.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Griffin Peck. I use they, them pronouns, and I currently work for the city of Morris as a sustainability project coordinator. And I am also coordinating our partnership, which is the Morris model. And it's a partnership between the city, the county, the university campus, a research farm, the school district, and the hospital. And together we have a shared set of sustainability aspirations for the community, and we all work on different projects. So at the city, we focused on, currently I focus on decarbonizing municipal operations through renewable energy and energy efficiency upgrades and that kind of stuff. The university has a pretty big focus on energy storage and exploring novel methods for campus-wide decarbonization. So they're already carbon neutral in their electricity. Now they're working to decarbonize their thermal load. You know, in Minnesota, we have -40-degree days, not this winter as much, but we have to be able to contend with the -40 in the winter, all the way up to 100+ in the summer. And so decarbonizing our thermal loads and our cooling loads, but especially the thermal loads, is particularly difficult. The research farm, they work on cutting edge ag innovation, so decarbonizing agriculture through different means, agrivoltaics. They're thinking, they do a lot of research on green hydrogen and green ammonia. And then, you know, across the partnership, we have smaller projects at the county, and within the community as well. We have a community organization that organizes their own kind of projects and submits. So right now there's a group working on a food assessment or emergency food assessment for the county. So all that to say, we work on a lot of different sustainability stuff. And I think the part of my profession I find most rewarding is working with people who might normally be opposed to renewable energy, and finding ways to frame it in a way that they are not opposing renewable energy and actually going out and wanting to get renewable energy on their property. And so that's really rewarding to be able to see that kind of shift in people. But yeah, thanks.
Maybe you could do a podcast on that when you got that solved. Is that Keita who just joined?
Yes, it is. Hi, nice to see everyone.
Yeah.
We had a luncheon, so I apologize that I'm late.
No problem. So, yeah, we're just starting to have everybody introduce themselves before we get into the meat of the topic. So do you want to?
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful timing, I guess. I'm Quita. I'm here and I work at Sage Development Authority. I'm the community outreach specialist and also the project coordinator for solar here at Sage. So nice to meet you all and thanks for having me.
And is Sage the community or is that the organization? What?
Sage is the organization, but I work here in Fort Yates, North Dakota. I can't complain today. We have some sun, so it's cold where we're at and good old North Dakota.
I'm gonna get there someday. Tolu,
Wow.
did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
So-
Let me try and come off my, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tolu Omotosho, Director of Energy Solutions at NRECA. NRECA is the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. We represent the interests of about 900 electric cooperatives in 48 states in the US. So our electric cooperative provide power to about 42 million Americans, I believe, across all of the states. And our project team is called Partnerships Delivering Defined Mutual Goals. So the whole idea of this partnership is to bring together electric cooperatives, technology partners, and large accounts to do joint projects that are beneficial to the communities, the cooperatives, and then also the large accounts themselves. So what we're trying to do is to deploy microgrids in rural and remote areas. And we've decided to use 3 site locations to pretty much kind of test run this partnership framework. So we're looking to deploy this partnership, this microgrids using available federal funding from the OECD and the GDO in the future. So our projects, we're just going to be doing preliminary engineering studies at these sites to look at how feasible the microgrids are, both financially and then technology-wise. And then in terms of my profession, what I find most rewarding, I think what I find most rewarding is the ability to actually use my skill sets to impact people's lives directly. So, when I was looking at opportunities to join NRECA, I had other options to work for the public corporations. But then you get sucked into all of this bureaucracy and then you don't even know what your work or how your work that you do on a daily basis impact people's lives. So working at NREC, I'm able to use my skills, my resources, and then all the network that I have to improve people's lives in rural areas, like, building these microgrids, which essentially improve reliabilities in those areas. Right. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Now, I think the only person who hasn't introduced themselves is Suzanne, and she's doesn't have a microphone, I believe. Suzanne, maybe you could put information about yourself in the chat if you'd like, and then we'll know more about you if you'd like to do that. But unless you are able to talk in another, 5 seconds, I'm going to think you can't.
I think she did already put it in the chat already.
Okay. All right, let me see.
If you'd like, I can read it.
Oh, well, I've got it here. So Suzanne Keys with Sun Solar Inc., a community-based group in Mendenhall, Mississippi. Our project is to create a microgrid demonstration agri-solar farm on part of a 120-acre farm that our church owns. She's a consultant to Sun Solar, and she's been working with this idea even before Biden was elected. She's still working her day. You're still working your day job as well as a law clerk, and your group's excited to be working to develop a model that other small farmers in Mississippi can replicate to maximize the use and income on their farms. You're working with Alcorn State University on the project, and historically Black college or university. And you also have a workforce development component to the project, and working with local community college on that, as well as our local high school. Great, that very comprehensive. You're hitting a lot of things that I'm excited about, working with local schools and all that to build a workforce, working with minority groups. So anyway, thank you for putting that in the chat. That's very good to have that opportunity to read that. So now my last slide before we dig into the work. Well, there's a poll though, but now that everybody's introduced, we just want to kind of do some rules of the road to makes everything as productive and fun and enjoyable as possible. So as you all know, this is a fully virtual session. We would like you to keep your cameras on if you can, but put yourself on mute when you're not speaking. This next one is probably the hardest. Keep your mobile phone silent and refrain from checking your email if you can. I know that's hard for lots of us, but we're hoping that you can do that. We'd like your active participation. So as we mentioned, you can put messages in the chat throughout, and we have different discussion sessions where you can make comments or ask questions about what's happened, what's been discussed beforehand. We like everybody to respect each other's opinions and insights as we discuss them. We prefer that you not step away. If you have to, please make it brief, but we will have breaks throughout. We have 3 different breaks. They're rather short, but there are breaks. So if you needed to check an email or something like that, we have 5 and 10 minutes sprinkled here and there. And then lastly, at the very end, we're going to have a survey. It's an anonymous survey, but it's very helpful in terms of, what we're doing right, what we could do better. And we share that with NREL, which they will use for workshops and trainings in the future as well. So please do the survey when we're wrapping up. And then last of all, we just want to point out, we won't be able to answer specific questions about the prize, like if you have about requirements and that sort of thing. So if you do have questions that aren't related to this particular topic, you should send them to ruralenergyprize@nrel.gov. So ruralenergyprize@nrel.gov, and they'll be able to answer your questions specifically related to the prize itself. So now we have a polling question to get a little bit of a sense of, what your interests are. So if you could respond to the Zoom poll. I guess Milani's going to bring that up. Yep. Or you can put it in the chat. So just read those and pick which one's most important to you or you're most eager to learn about. All right, so Milani says we've got everybody's answers. So now you can show the poll results. How SMART goals relate to key performance indicators. Oh, we've got a 3-way tie. Methods for measuring KPIs and how to use logic models to create performance measures. So there we have 3-way tie. I do think knowing why what a mature KPI is and why it's important is a good one. I think you'll be interested in that as too. So with that, we have an understanding of that. So now Ryan is going to take it away and talk to us about establishing goals.
Thanks, Crystal. I'm excited that everyone sort of has a broad interest. So in establishing goals, we can go to the next slide. So in this module, we'll be talking about improving our understanding of SMART goals and how to identify meaningful key performance indicators or KPIs to measure whether the goals that you're setting out are achievable. And this is based on your own project vision and objectives. So, you can keep your prize winning opportunity in mind when going through this or think related to the field. Next slide. I think it's important to also cover here just how this relates to the goals of the ERC program. So, The intention here is to challenge individuals and organizations to develop partnership plans or innovative financing strategies to, one, help rural or remote communities improve their energy systems by advancing clean energy projects that either improve the overall cost effectiveness of energy generation, transmission, or distribution systems, site or upgrade transmission and distribution lines, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, provide or modernize electric generation facilities, develop microgrids, or increase energy efficiency. Two, advance clean energy projects. So ERC project plans should present new ways to improve the resilience, reliability, safety, availability, and environmental performance of energy systems serving our nation's rural or remote communities. And it's important as we go through today that, when we think through our SMART goals, our KPIs, and, the creation of a logic model, that the Department of Energy wants to advance these clean energy solutions in ways that are replicable and scalable. Other things I just want to point out, and Crystal spoke to this earlier, is just logic models are not a requirement of the program. So SMART goals were submitted as part of phase 1, and a logic model is just a proven method, and we're going to get there, of helping to develop clear SMART goals. And then describing the progress towards completing the SMART goal as part of phase 2. So no construction is required or expected during this phase, and we're currently just working on establishing your goals. Next slide. So just to continue this, another piece of this is the community benefits of these goals. So as you're thinking through development of SMART goals, the program participants should describe how your projects support communities and workforce engagement, invest in the American workforce, advance energy and environmental justice, and promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And, we spoke to replicability, but it's key to market adoption of these technologies and benefiting rural or remote areas beyond the program. We can go to the next slide. So defining SMART goals. So SMART goals are S.M.A.R.T. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So when we talk about being specific, be specific with your goals. So make sure they have a clear objective and what that might mean. So there are two ways to interpret this. You can either be specific with your goal or ensure that they have a clear objective. So just, we want to have a clean energy community. That seems pretty broad. So how are you going to make that more specific? And we'll get there. So measurable, having goals that can be measured enables you to know whether you have reached your goal or not. So, and we'll talk about this when we get to KPIs, but how are you able in an evidence-based manner to draw the connection between what you've set out to do and how you've successfully achieved it? So setting and tracking metrics or key performance indicators, KPIs, helps us all understand the desired impact, or, and we'll talk about this as well, in the course of doing the work, if you need to pivot in order to either track information better or find other ways to measure your success. Achievable. So when establishing your SMART goals, ask yourself whether they can be realistically achieved. So my entire community will run on solar energy. I'm sure we all hope that one day we can have a clean energy future, but right now, does that seem achievable? I think, a longer term might be needed for that. So just thinking if it's achievable within the term of the project. Consider short, immediate, and long-term objectives. So maybe long-term, you hope your entire community is on renewable energy, but for now, this is just by way of example. Relevant. How do your project goals help you reach your overarching energy, community, or workforce benefit goals as it relates to the program. And then time bound, give your objectives a target for when you expect results, and then set them against benchmarks or time frames. So as I said before, when you're setting achievable goals and they're measurable, you have to think, okay, in a month, in a quarter, in a year, where do I think I will be? And setting your goals accordingly. Next slide. So as we look to refine our goals, our SMART goals, and establish them, we have to let's work on our framing in terms of getting to a SMART goal. So in this exercise, I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to look at a goal and see if whether or not we can make it SMART, or see if it already is SMART, and if we've gotten to that place. So in the following example, an organization received funding to make financing available for energy savings projects in the community. It developed the following goal: research funding models that could be used to equitably distribute funds for well-planned and documented energy savings projects in the community, and identify 3 viable stakeholder-supported models by May 2024. What is done well in this example? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? Is it time bound? And is there a way that you think that this could be improved? And I would welcome you all to come off mute, and we can annotate an answer. But I would just love to hear your feedback and what you think about this.
Maybe determining what specific funding model could be more specific.
Okay. I guess I would ask you to drill down a little further on that as well. Can you think of
Maybe
a way to qualify different types of funding models?
maybe I would say, I don't know funding models per se, but I would say something like I don't know. I would definitely think that this one was okay, SMART goal, but I would like to know, I guess, how we're going to measure, like, okay, it says it could be used to equitably or equitably, it's a terrible word, distribute funds or well planned, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't really say like how long, like, like it doesn't really give us our measurable data that we're looking for. If I'm
Okay, interesting. Okay, let's see. So in terms of equitable distribution, you're questioning whether or not you're questioning how to measure that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it does say, or it's like between 3 stakeholders by May. So we have a time bound, and we have a, what our efforts are. You know what I'm trying to get to?
Yes, I definitely understand what you're speaking to.
Yeah.
So, Tolu, do you have something to add here?
Yes, just to add to what I just said, I mean, I was thinking along the lines of number. So it said research funding models, maybe if it said research 10 funding models, so you have a specific number of models that you're researching, and then you can also add the comment Peter just mentioned to the types of funding models.
Okay, so when we say by May 2024, are you looking for the starting point for when this research would begin? Is that what you mean? When you talk about time bound?
I would say so.
Okay.
When it starts.
Yep. So when it starts, that's missing here.
Because then we need that for measurable. To measure, don't we, kind of?
Okay, Heather, I'll get to your question in 1 second. Is there anything else here we think that could make this a SMART goal?
Maybe the scale of funding, how much money they're looking to.
Yeah,
fund.
and that would certainly add a sense of measurability, right?
'Cause it's hard to know if they're saying like for commercial or a farm, or what kind of like multifamily housing, whatever, you know.
Yeah, and then I think that also speaks to like a type of a funding model, which was what Kita was getting at before, right?
Yeah.
Like, are these public-private partnerships? Is this foundation funded? Is this a state and federal government collected action or local government action? So like, what is a viable opportunity here? Heather, I do want to answer your question. So
Well, and are these supposed to be standalone that you would be able to pull it out from any context?
Which
Or a SMART goal, should it be able to stand alone like this without?
Yeah, so it should be able to exist on its own and sort of be the place from which you work from. When you have a project milestone, which is what you're asking about, that definitely relates more to the time-bound piece of this.
Okay.
You know, we did mention here, like, oh, well, what, you know, when would this research start? And then we want to have this information completed by May 2024. Say I started in July 23. You had that window of time, and then within that window of time, you would have milestones, and you can either set them out for yourself. And I'm not going to speak to the specifics of this program, but say, you know, if you have milestones within this program as it relates to your SMART goal, you would build those into your work. So making this up, say you had a report that was due December 31st, 2023. Say it's an interim report. You're working towards a milestone. That's a milestone that you would work toward. So if your SMART goal is established, you would begin tracking any sort of pieces of data. We haven't gotten to KPIs yet, but you would be tracking pieces of data with that in mind in your plan. Oh, I have to report this to, you know, whoever has given me the funding opportunity, or to let them know about my progress. So that's more of what a milestone would be. And then as you create a project plan, which is based on the SMART goal, you can lay out those milestones. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And then Suzanne, I can't speak specifically to a funding model, much like Kita. I'm not an expert in all types of funding models, but I think by way of this example, you're researching types of opportunities that could lead to the success of a program that would, you know, energy savings project for a community. Much like this one. So, you know, whether or not your state provides local subsidies for communities, and I can think of, you know, folks who have banded together to help create solar opportunities in their own residential communities. So I think there's just varying methods here, and I can't speak to any specific funding models. I'm sorry if I am not an expert there. Are there any other questions here? We have one more similar exercise. Okay, great. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so our goal here is to increase the amount of solar power in our energy grid. Is this a SMART goal?
Yeah, but no, or it could be a SMART goal, but it's not a great one. It's definitely we need to be a little bit more specific. We need to have something to measure. Yeah, just missing a lot of components in our SMART goal acronym.
Okay, so why don't we start with specific? Is this specific? Okay, Heather's shaking her head no. So, okay,
You give a kilowatt or megawatt goal. Or a
okay, great.
percentage,
So we have something measurable.
like a percentage would help,
Sure. Okay, so
by
increase.
50% or 100% or whatever. Mhm.
Okay, so increase the amount of solar power in our energy grid by 100%.
And then defining our, like where?
Okay, so
Our state, our county, our
yeah, what county are you in, Heather?
Thurston County.
Thurston County. Okay, so increase the amount of solar power in Thurston County's energy grid by 100%.
Yeah, that's not going to happen this year, but like then, so you need to say by when, within
Yeah.
5 years. Yeah,
5 years.
sure.
How are we going to do that?
With better consumer financing. Yeah.
Okay, so
Like
there,
if it was similar to going into a car dealership and you could just walk out with your solar project all financed with simplified, streamlined. There we go. Streamlined, not just better, streamlined.
through streamlined financing.
Yeah.
Okay. Another way to think about how is how, let's say you are siting solar farms on farmland, there's that, but then what about residential properties or commercial
Yeah.
properties? Like
Yeah,
how,
we have a lot of warehouses here, so how to how to get those warehouse building owners to put them on the roofs.
okay, great. All right, so let's focus on that. So through increased implementation of solar farms on warehouse roofs, we will increase the amount of solar power in Thurston County's energy grid by maybe not 100%, but we threw that out there earlier, so we'll just stick with it, in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this is common around the country. I've heard we get a lot of door-to-door salespeople, and it's really hard to know if they're legit or not. So I would almost say consumer, like we need a consumer reports, sort of like check out this company. Are they someone that we could trust or not? Mhm.
Okay, so I might say that something like that is actually overly descriptive for
A
this.
deliverable, yeah.
For this particular moment, but I
Yeah,
think it is extremely important because you could still say reliable
Right.
solar power. And when you say reliable, that can mean we have accountable partners,
Accountable,
so you can work from
trusted,
just that
yeah.
one qualifier alone and really
Cool.
pull that out. So I think it's good to call that out. So it's
You want
kind of like
reliable?
starting
You want
big and then refining.
Do we put reliable in there? Is that, you want that adjective?
Yeah, I think that would be great. So if I remember this all right, it's increase the amount of reliable solar power in Thurston County's energy grid by 100% in 5 years through the implementation of rooftop solar on warehouses.
All right.
You're pretty good.
I guess we have to know there are enough warehouses and that there's enough square footage on those, but anyway.
That's
I think
true.
that's a really cool project, and I'm excited to see where our Meta project goes. But
Same. Maybe we could say rooftop and residential, because there
Okay.
definitely are a lot of multifamily housing. I live in more of an urban area, so it's not,
Okay,
there's not a lot
so
of farms here.
so
There are a
commercial-
few, there's a few.
okay, so commercial and residential solar, rooftop solar.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that we think is missing here? So, you know, this is
Are we missing the time? I mean,
We said within 5 years.
within 5 years from
So,
now? or-
yeah, and if you want to get more specific, I think you could say like beginning February 2023
Okay. but
in
not
5 years.
needed.
I think what's missing is it doesn't have, and this isn't part of the SMART, but well, the worthwhile is it doesn't have an equity focus. You know?
yeah.
So when you said reliable, maybe we can say reliable and equitable. Something, put some word in there to show that that's going to include some Justice 40 stuff.
So maybe
No, but if it's
I'm
100%,
trying to,
everybody, isn't it?
well, not necessarily.
That's a problem in the past. No, it hasn't.
Oh.
Yeah,
Definitely
because
people left out.
say you're starting with 2 homes and then you go to 4 homes, technically that's 100%
Oh,
increase.
okay.
So,
Well, I
um,
know that there's already a
yeah.
lot in my county.
right.
We're just
So-
outside of Seattle, so I mean, yeah, it'd probably be megawatts, and you know.
So, you know, it's 100% increase from current data. And then, but then the energy grid, I would say it's more about the equitable installation or just, you know, distribution and installation of rooftop solar, right? It's
Yeah, and equitable in terms of employment.
mhm.
You know, that's the benefits are going to actually flow to underserved populations.
And
as
I
opposed
think,
to just the upper tier.
okay. And I think that can also be part of your plan as well. You know, to be equitable or to think in an equitable way, you know, you are not just covering the number of people served with solar on their houses. It's in what communities are we not seeing this work at all?
Or how are the savings being passed on to
Yes.
the other
That
consumer?
is another byproduct of this work, right? Is
Yeah.
some people get solar and then what happens to those who don't? So
Yeah.
great. This is really great stuff. Anything else we want to add here before we move on?
My SMART goals that I submitted for the Arnold grant are terrible.
Well, we're gonna get you there, Kita. It's okay.
Yeah.
What?
I said my SMART goals that I submitted for
Oh.
the Arnold grant are terrible.
They're not that bad.
I don't think I submitted an achievable, relevant, and yeah, great pit anyway.
It'd be nice if we had a pull down menu, right? With all the elements, like pick one from this category.
I'm surprised we submitted them as an organization now that I look back, or now that I'm looking into this.
Well, maybe when we get to our discussion later, Lakita, you could pull some of that up and we can talk about that. I think that'll be interesting to go through.
I just want to mention, I think Heather at the mention, I was asking if these SMART goals relate to phase 1 or phase 2, but we understood that under phase 1, you were asked to submit SMART goals, and under phase 2, you're going to talk about your progress towards meeting those. But we'll talk later. There's also the potential for adjusting your goals as you get smarter about the project itself. So
exactly,
you're not tied to them. That's part of the process, is to talk about how they may change, and they may change over time.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, I think we've had a lot of really rich discussion here already. We can move to the next slide. You know, I I'm happy to keep talking about this. Then the next piece, we're going to have Emily talk about key performance indicators. So think of it as like the M in SMART, it's the measurable piece. So unless there are any questions or comments, and I'm happy to speak to them, I'm going to kick it to Emily. Great.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Emily.
Yes, and feel free to jump in with any questions as you all have them. So I think we can flip to the next slide. Okay, so Ryan just walked us through SMART goals. To think about SMART goals in the context of KPIs, yes, KPIs sort of help with the measurable piece of it, really measuring that success. So when I think about SMART goals, I'm thinking about what's sort of the ultimate outcome that we want to achieve with the project. And then the key performance indicators, or the KPIs, are sort of the actual measures or metrics for determining whether we were successful or whether those objectives were met. So we can flip to the next slide. And we'll go into KPIs in a little bit more detail. So again, KPIs are the measures that you will essentially be using to track progress towards your goals or intended outcomes. I'll say the key thing with KPIs is that they're metrics that really should be measurable or sort of quantitative, and they show the impact of the project's mission. So kind of really tied to what the ultimate goals are, what you're trying to achieve with the project. KPIs, we'll go through a couple examples, but you can think about it. They can include everything from program outcomes. So when you all were talking about your projects at the beginning, some of the things that I heard that could be examples here are like number of people confirmed eligible for a certain initiative. It can be impact on decarbonization, so sort of like measuring that impact. KPIs can also be financial, so it could be cost savings, return on investment, things like that. So the range of KPIs can really vary. It's just like how are we measuring the different aspects of success. Other important pieces of KPIs is they should be timely and consistent. So sort of consistent and regular tracking of KPIs is important. So you can kind of have insights into how things are going along the way and adjust project planning or activities as needed, depending on kind of how your KPIs are looking. It's often the case, though, on long-term projects, such as I think most of the ones that you all are working on, that, and we were talking about this a little bit before, but sometimes at the beginning of a project, when you're submitting the application, you have a certain set of goals in mind. As you get into the project, sometimes you might realize that there are some that you didn't think of at the beginning, or maybe they've shifted. It's okay to sort of adjust. It's okay to adjust your KPIs as you go. The goal is to kind of be consistent throughout, but it is okay to adjust as you go a little bit. So that's important to keep in mind as you're getting ready for some of you to submit a phase 2 application. All right. So then the last piece on KPIs, just some questions to consider when creating them or thinking through them, is like, who are you serving? So you could have KPIs in terms of the intended impact on the community or the population. Think about what outcomes are you trying to achieve for the target population. So that ties into the SMART goals. How are you going to measure the ultimate outcomes? How are you going to measure whether the outcomes have been achieved? So setting some quantitative measures for determining whether you've been successful with the project. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but also thinking about kind of what data you can collect with KPIs. It's important to set KPIs that you can measure. And so think as you're setting them and thinking about what are we going to use to measure success, also thinking about what data you have access to and could collect is an important piece of that. And then it's also important to think about the performance targets for outcomes of interest. So not only thinking about kind of the target population that you're serving, but to the extent that you can set a target, kind of like how many people are you looking to impact? what return on investment would you consider successful? And so sort of setting those targets can also help with thinking about project success. All right, next slide. So this is a helpful framework, I think, for KPI maturity. Not every KPI is going to be perfectly mature and meet all of the criteria in the mature bucket, but this is just sort of a framework for thinking about what like a really strong KPI looks like versus those that are less mature. I think the key things here are making sure you sort of have a clear and standard way for calculating the metric. So if the project is 2 years long and you're measuring KPIs every quarter, it's important to sort of measure them in the same way throughout the course of the project so that you're getting consistent metrics of success. You want these KPIs to be very relevant to the population being served. So getting it as close to the intended impact and the intended population as possible. And then the other key piece here is around data collection, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit, but the more sort of like automated you can make the data collection, the better. That's not always going to be possible. A lot of data collection is manual and require manual efforts, but the gold standard is getting it as automated as possible. So whether that's through, let's say, regular reporting, regular checks on publicly available data, in a perfect world, doing kind of like APIs and data integration, getting them sort of like as automated as possible is kind of a gold standard in terms of maturity. All right. Next slide. So I'll walk through an example here. And just to tie this back into sort of the program's overarching goals, we talked about one of the goals is that the projects are replicable and scalable. And DOE sort of wants projects to meet those characteristics. Having clear documentation of program activities and the outcomes, which can be measured through KPIs, it's important because those can sort of help define a project's progress and contribute to them being replicable and scalable. Next slide. Okay, so as we think about measuring KPIs, we've listed here a couple of ways that you can think about collecting the data. I'm sure some of the things on here are not brand new, but these are sort of like the key data collection mechanisms that we think about when thinking about setting KPIs and how we might get the data. The first one that we typically suggest starting with is just collecting anything that's publicly available. So setting KPIs that tie into any publicly available data that you can get. In some cases, you may consider partnerships or data sharing with other organizations that you can get data from. But I think sort of the easiest way to do this is to collect data that's publicly available. For the data that's not publicly available, some of the mechanisms that you can use are surveying. So that's creating a survey to collect data on the goals and KPIs you're tracking. Surveys are awesome because you can sort of structure it and craft it in such a way to get the data that you want that's not already there. Observing is another way to collect data. So this is what we mean by observing is kind of what it sounds like. So observing a process or people's experience with the program. The example that comes to mind is coming from my transportation background. So in transportation, sometimes data on capacity and traffic and things like that is collected through observing traffic flow. So observing sort of processes that are taking place and collecting data that way. Interviewing is an awesome way to get qualitative data, get context, really dig in and get a lot of detail in terms of people's experience with the program. We don't typically think of qualitative data as much of a KPI. I guess it could be, but KPIs are typically more quantitative. But you can use interviews to get quantitative data as well. So like asking folks about about return, about impact, things like that. So interviewing is a good tool. And then canvassing the public, that's pretty high effort, but a potential way to reach community members and get information that you need from the community. All right, next slide. So here we will be, so in the first box here, we have a description that you're asked to provide in your phase 2 summaries about building trust and partnership with organizations, especially those that are associated with overburdened and underserved communities. And there's a variety of ways that you might address the topic. So we have an example here of an equity-focused workforce development program with the goal of working with an organizational sponsor that serves underserved groups to establish training and targeting certain participants for that training. So we can review the SMART goals and examples of relevant KPIs here. The goal or the SMART goal is within 2 years in collaboration with a local organization serving underserved groups, develop a training program for clean energy jobs with career growth potential and above the median level compensation. So some of the example KPIs that we pulled out here are shown in the rightmost box. I won't read through all of them, but some of the things that I think about when looking at these KPIs that make them strong are that all of them are quantitative. So even though the first one doesn't look quantitative, you can think about it as sort of binary, like you launched the program or you didn't. So it's something that you can measure. It's very clear. It's time bound. So did you do something or did you not? That's something that you can measure. For the second bullet, 3 courses. It's very achievable. It's quantitative. You can measure it. It's a good KPI that that can be measured. And same with the last one. So it's, you have 25 participants, and that's something that can be measured. It's very achievable and something that you can track towards progress. And all of these, if I were thinking about designing a program, these could be tied back to the targets. So as you're thinking about what success looks like and what you want to achieve out of your programs, it's helpful to set targets, like how many courses are we going to deliver, how many participants do we want to enroll, and then that's a way to kind of track how you're doing in terms of achieving success.
Suzanne has we'll just do it as part of the discussion. Suzanne has a question. Do you include the method of measuring the KPI in your articulation of the KPI itself? There you go.
I will take a pass at this and let me know if I answer your question or not. When I think about it, I think we can answer this a little bit better once we get into the logic model example. So when I think about KPIs, it's like the KPI is the thing that you're measuring. And then the next step is to define how you're measuring it. So I don't typically include how you're going to measure it when I'm defining the KPI, but it's more of sort of like a complementary piece that I think about when setting them.
Yeah, you do have to make sure there is a way of measuring, right? I mean, otherwise it's guesswork, but.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think and I'm not saying if this is required for the grant or not, but in any sort of reporting that you all are doing, like that's where I would maybe include the method of measurement and the articulation of the KPI. I know there's probably nuance in how certain things are calculated. And so being really clear about how certain things were calculated, where the data came from, how it was measured, that would be important in terms of tracking success and sort of articulating how you're measuring the impact. So in that sense, I would talk about both, but the method, I wouldn't say necessarily has to be kind of articulated along with the KPI.
Okay.
Any other questions on this part?
All right. Now Ryan will take over, and then after we'll have a short break after he's finished with the next few, fun exercise. At least we think it's fun, right, Ryan?
Yeah. I think there's one more question from Suzanne.
Oh, okay.
The example you gave has numbers in there to measure each, so that is using available data. Can you give an example of a KPI that you would have to measure by another means, like observation?
Yeah, this isn't necessarily tied to that example on the other slide, but the one example that I mentioned is like in the transportation world, for instance, if you're trying to measure traffic, sometimes folks will literally sit on the side of the road and count the number of cars that go by, so they're observing what's happening. That's the type of situation where I would use observation as opposed to something like data that's publicly available or a survey. So in the energy world, it could be, this is probably a very basic example, but if you're observing maybe people's experience interacting with renewable infrastructure, if you are observing something like I don't know, weather or how that impacts energy development. Those are just like simple examples of where I would think observation would be helpful.
Well, and I'll just throw in, because I'm working on another workshop on energy efficiency upgrades, and we have certain characteristics of a qualified contractor. So an observation, like they do this when they go to the house, and they do this when they go to the house, and they have this conversation with the homeowner, et cetera. So an observation, if you wanted to kind of just do every once in a while, a check-in to see if your qualified contractors are being qualified, would be to follow along in the audit with them and then be checking to see if those things that are identified as quality audit are actually happening. So you are checking off what's happening. And Kita is asking if the slides will be available. Yes, they will be available. There's there's a slide at the very beginning that has a link where you'll be able to get these afterwards. Actually, the whole recording, as well as the slides.
Got a thumbs up from Kita.
Okay, cool.
Are there any
All right.
other questions or comments? Cool. Next slide. Okay, and so in this next exercise, we're actually going to take a look at an actual case study. And we're going to take a look first at the goal here. So to promote job creation and reduce aggregate greenhouse gas emissions through energy and resource saving retrofits of existing building stock. So that's what they're setting out to do. So we're reviewing the goal and deciding if it's SMART. So going back to what we learned earlier. And then we're going to discuss the measurement approaches. So if we can go to the next slide. So the original goal, as I stated earlier, was to promote job creation and reduce aggregate greenhouse gas emissions through energy and resource saving retrofits of existing building stock. So is this a SMART goal? I would argue it's close. But what can we do to make it smarter?
We could beef it up by adding more or measurable by including measurable data, I guess. Promote job creation by 20%, 10%. I don't know, increase job creation by a certain amount of people. I don't know.
Yeah, no, don't you got it. Those are a lot of important pieces. So increasing jobs by a certain percentage, that would certainly make it more measurable.
Reducing it by another percentage, I guess, or reducing, giving us some amount to measure there.
Okay, so yes, we're increasing job creation, so promoting job creation, and then we're also reducing aggregate greenhouse gas emissions. So, but we haven't set a measurable target there. So good call.
Who is being per specific? Who's doing this work? Or I guess would be my concern or my first.
Okay, so in lieu of making this more of like a mission statement, I'll just say like the answer here is, you know, we have, say it's a county energy program. Just for the purposes of this exercise. But to that point, you're talking about being more specific. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that. And it's relevant. So I do think this also speaks to relevancy. So like if you're talking about an arts organization, should an arts organization like would this type of work be relevant to their sort of programming? Likely not. So so trying to make it more relevant and specific.
So is that that's a relevant thing? Are you saying it's the county? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think it speaks to both a relevant and being a little more specific, but so it's a county program. Yeah.
You're seeing what my kids say about my typing. It goes back and forth.
I guess we don't see a time frame of this, a time reference of this so-called work.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So we're hoping to increase jobs by X percentage and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a set amount within. Is it a year?
Yeah.
Do you want to say, so we're in 2023, is it jumping forward 5 years, or are we, you know, are we giving it a year, or are we giving it,
Yeah, I think this is doable within a year, right? No.
Yeah, I guess depending on what is measurable, right? So if we think it's a few hundred jobs or a low percentage, maybe, you know, that's definitely achievable, could be achievable in a year. Because we do have to think about achievability. So like within that achievability piece, what are we doing to get there?
Right. I think that after we add these components, we'll have a better SMART goal. Definitely.
I'm sorry, after we add what? I missed the word.
All these that we just listed, all these components will definitely have a better SMART goal, but it was a SMART goal to begin with. It just now it's nice and beefed up.
I'm going to push back just a little bit, Kita, because I think you were really onto this earlier with both the job creation and the reducing greenhouse gas emissions piece. There's a next part of the sentence that I think we can get more specific on. So through energy and resource saving retrofits of existing building stock. And I think we're going to get more to this when we talk about logic models, but like what within that type of work will ensure that that is achievable?
Good question. I would,
and I would also argue like this would require, you know, like me being an energy expert, but say it's tied to the goals of this program. So like workforce, or how are we getting other people in the community involved?
community education. Yeah, I agree with you.
Great. So I think getting just like even a little more specific in that back half of the sentence would also help us out in carving out the goal. But I think you really got us there, Kita. Thank you so much. I think we can go to the next exercise, which
Okay.
is sort of the flip of what we've been doing. So, Kita, you were talking a lot about what is measurable, right? You were talking about increasing, promoting job creation, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions, but you can break all that down even further in your KPIs. So we want to talk to or speak to measurement approaches. So going back to what Emily was saying on like survey creation, using tools or technology that might be on hand, observations, canvassing, what are approaches that we can take here to try to measure each of these KPIs?
We can, okay.
So the first one is retrofit about 27,000 single family homes with an average 20% energy reduction countywide, plus 2,600 multifamily homes.
That would be definitely collecting available data.
Okay.
Or it could be collecting available data to be observing or no?
It depends on the source of information. And I think this might even link up a little bit with what Suzanne is saying in the chat. She's comparing utility bills usage pre and post retrofit. So
yep.
Your available data, I guessing the available data you're talking about, Kita, is like, where solar is sited today, and then post siting, you would know how many homes have seen the addition of solar.
Okay.
Right? Is that what you're talking about with available data?
Well,
like what is current?
No, basically you said the measurable approach. So the measurable approach to knowing the retrofit of 27,000 single family homes would be collecting this available data to us already that's given to us. Or I mean, I guess I don't know. I would think that this would be a data that's already given to us in some way, shape, or form, but I don't know.
Okay.
The measurement approach for this.
No, you're good. So I'm going to go back to Suzanne. She has comparing utility bills and usage pre and post retrofit. So that's definitely a way to capture the 20% energy reduction. So that's a good example.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay,
But then there are two more pieces of this because there's 3 data points. Then there's the retrofit of single family homes. And I think that does tie into the available data that you might have, Kita. Like, I know which homes don't have solar because I've captured that information. And then you might work with a developer and aggregate the information to know the new addition of homes just by surveying. And then plus the 2,600 multifamily homes. So similar situation. You might know who didn't have it, and then eventually you will know the new homes that have been retrofitted with solar, multifamily homes.
Well, yes, we have 0 homes. So
yeah, 0 homes, and then let's increase that just a bit. Okay, so reduce annual purchased energy consumption in those homes by an aggregate 300 billion BTUs per year and associated energy costs by 4 million per year.
Your measuring could be I would say your measuring would definitely be maybe surveying. Couldn't you do surveying work, or I don't know.
Yeah, this is definitely a complex KPI. I think we would need more sophisticated tools at hand to measure something like this. If we were fortunate enough to benefit from a utility or a co-op or just anyone who might be able to provide that type of specific data. Because sometimes it's also anonymized, so you don't really know other people's output. But yeah, it's a type of survey, right? You're probably going to need to solicit this information from sources outside of yourself or sources outside of your own resources, really, right? Like you can't do this in-house, or you might not be able to. Create 3,200 jobs.
You would want to do this by, this one will definitely be the one where it's getting the public gauged into solar, or like, you know what I mean, renewable energy, trying to workforce develop, you know, create these programs and trainings around this entity, I guess. I mean, so sorry.
No,
It's
no
like-
apologize. It's because like, and it's funny because like this one is really broad, right? Like it's not specific like the one before it. So because this really starts in one place and ends in a whole other place, right? It's like I got 4,000 people to sign up to just even say they were interested in a training or a workshop or a certificate program or something, you know, like it can start there and then it can end with 5 years from now, the Department of Labor has released data that has said like this workforce has grown by a certain percentage and you were able to break down within your community.
Targeting, yeah, the demographics for
You
this.
can get really specific, but it can start as early as someone signed up and said they were interested to 5,000 people actually attended the training and 4,000 of them got jobs, you know? So based on another survey that you sent out following the training. So there are many, there are likely many ways to collect this information. Or at least track it. And then lastly, reduce the county's annual greenhouse gas emissions attributable to energy consumption in its existing building stock by 36.287 metric tons of carbon dioxide.
You got me on this one. I would say, I don't know, you could definitely do this by interviewing the stakeholders. I don't know.
Yeah, this one is extremely sophisticated and definitely requires technology and might even require connection to several types of stakeholders to even verify data like this. You know, Emily, I don't know if you can speak to carbon dioxide measurement from a Department of Transportation aspect, but you know, it's you know, not the simplest thing to measure. So it does require a very high level of sophistication.
Yeah, you'd have to know whether your electricity, how much carbon comes from electricity versus if you switch to solar, how that reduced.
Way over my pay grade.
Yeah, somebody else.
Yeah, but even in thinking about it, it's like, oh, who can I contact who might know how to provide this information to me or break it down? Because it doesn't have to just be on you.
I mean, like let's say speaking from me as I am now, and I wanted to know this about where I'm serving today, who is out there that would have this type of information like readily on hand? Nobody really. I mean, like who could you contact to even start to get this kind of information?
Yeah, anecdotally, like I couldn't speak to where you might find within a county the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but I think that's where almost that stakeholder engagement can be really helpful. Have you tapped the local university, or have you asked, and I don't mean to speak out of turn here, but like, is there someone at the Department of Energy who might be able to refer you to someone? So those are just potential ways, because again, like if you can't work within yourself in this particular moment, ask for help. Because this is definitely a very specific KPI. We have one question. Are such macro KPIs necessary, and do we need to include them in our projects? I'm gonna defer that question to Emily for now. If not, I don't see Emily on the call. Not Emily Futcher, Emily from the Department of Energy. If not, I think it would be great to email the Rural Energy Prize email in regards to including such a KPI in your project. I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
Well,
Sorry.
and I'll just mention, this is an existing case study from LA County for the Energy California upgrade program. So we didn't create these. They were already there. So definitely weren't putting them together with the idea that they would be ones that you would necessarily develop. All the same, Emily Benson would be the better source for telling you how detailed you think they need to be. I did want to mention Suzanne had put in a comment about needing to know what percentage of building stock can be retrofitted and by what means to determine the number that can be achieved in the 1 year. And I think that's from the slide before, and I can put that in as how we would calculate something in the earlier slide while we're on a break. So I'll get that.
No, that's a really great thing to raise, Suzanne. And definitely not an aspect I was thinking about. And it was not raised in the case study, but identifying what is able to be retrofitted. I'm assuming you might also need to decide based on solar exposure, if you would achieve the outcome you're looking for. So yeah, that's a really great thing to raise. And I'm sorry I can't answer your second question on macro KPIs, but it does. I think the purpose of this exercise was just to get us all thinking about KPI maturity and the level of sophistication that might be required for certain KPIs, not saying that they were specific to your projects. And we can keep talking about that if you'd like. Otherwise, I think we have.
That was kind of hard thinking about the measurements. I mean, literally kind of put into perspective do I even have a measurable KPI in my SMART goal that I submitted? Like, honestly. So it's kind of, it put in perspective for me anyway, sorry.
Oh, do not apologize. I think in the next module, Kita, you are going to be playing a crucial role in talking about your SMART goal, and whether, we can help you build that out, but also thinking about if you do in fact have a measurable KPI. I'm sure you do. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, we did the discussion. Great.
So now we have a 5-minute break. So it's 2:31 East Coast. Was that 12:31? No. So if everybody would be back in about 5 minutes, we'll say at a 36-minute, whatever time you're. So we have Kita, Suzanne, we're ready to move forward. All right. Milani, there we go.
Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so in module 2, in this next section, we're going to be introducing you all to logic models. And again, they're not required for ERC projects, but they're very helpful when planning for your project and as you go along through implementation and evaluation. We're going to visualize how a logic model can provide a graphic illustration to communicate the relationship between your resources and activities and what your intended outcomes are, the impacts that you hope to make. I like to say it's a 2D version of a 3D concept. So it's going to, be on paper, but it's really going to help you, I think, see all the bubbles will start popping up in front of you as you think through things. And I've already been seeing a lot of that action happening as we've been going through SMART goals, concepts, and KPIs. And then lastly, in this section, this part of this session, we're going to demonstrate how a logic model can help you develop a performance measurement framework. So going through the KPIs to collect and evaluate, report on performance measures and using insights from those measures to improve your performance. Okay, so we're starting at the very top of the logic model, and we're going to go through these concepts, and then we're going to provide you examples to just sort of illustrate what we're talking about here. So a logic model framework is a graphic illustration or roadmap to help with program planning and implementation. So like I said, a 2D framework for a 3D, concept. It involves identifying 5 planning areas. So in your planned work, so starting at the very top, you got your planned work, which will lead to your intended results, which will then lead to your program's impact. Now, within planned work and intended results, you have your inputs and activities, and your outputs and your outcomes, and that leads to the impact. So inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts, and the KPIs to measure whether the planned inputs and activities have been achieved. So next slide. So what do we mean as we go through inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and the impact? So in our planned work, we have our inputs. So what resources do we need to run our initiative or to implement our project? So very broadly, we need money. we need finances, services, people, talent, supplies, land, facilities. Those are the tools that we have at our disposal to do the work. What is the work? So what are our activities? So what does the program plan to do with the inputs to get to the next phase, to achieve a result? So broadly speaking, I have $1 million and a building where I can provide COVID testing, and that's a very clear result. We saw the standing up of testing centers, vaccination centers, that sort of thing. And then there was an intended the outcome was to serve these people, protect them from COVID, protect others from COVID, that sort of thing. So that's just an example of, we had these resources, they were stood up, they had a result. So now we get to the intended results. So what will your initiative deliver? What are the direct types of and quantities of those services? I think moving away from public health for a second, we can talk about energy again. We have 10 acres of, I don't know, let's say urban land that is unclaimed. So I'm not speaking of rural communities just yet, but we can work in a private-public partnership to site solar on that property. And then the amount of energy from that particular solar farm will then serve X many homes with clean energy. That is a output with literal energy output. And then the outcomes. What are the changes that the initiative have generated? So X amount of homes were then served by this renewable energy resource. Those homes are therefore seeing reductions in energy costs. We are seeing a move away from other forms of energy in the community that might yield positive impacts. And then the program impact. So what is the long-term change you hope to see in the system, organization, or community because of the program? I definitely would love to hear your inputs on this, but it could be anywhere from others are seeing this solar farm and they are inspired to therefore get solar in neighboring communities themselves or start similar projects. The homes that are in that same community who might not be benefiting from that solar farm, they may find ways to also engage in renewable energy. Maybe there's job creation in that community from this solar farm. It's really the longer term impact, and not just about the energy savings that might happen in a given year or anything like that. Let's move to the next slide. So again, examples. So inputs, what are the resources that we need to do our work? Land, a solar developer, auditing and energy efficiency, upgrade services. So again, we're really focusing here on energy. What are the activities that we're doing here? Creating a rooftop solar program, conducting energy efficiency audits and upgrades in homes. What are our outputs? So renewable solar power for these residents, energy efficient homes. And then the outcome is reliable, resilient, and or low cost energy from a renewable source. So, and then that will also lead to lower home energy bills for that community. And then the program impact is bringing affordable solar power to the county, including X% of low-income households. So you're making the work equitable. I probably should have started saying this at the beginning, but as you might notice here, you can actually start almost anywhere in this logic model in the way that you're thinking through this. So at the top, there's the program goal. So advance a clean energy project in a rural or remote community. So that's part of the ERC program. If that is the program goal, you can immediately start to deconstruct that and use it for your project in its intended program impact. So you want to bring affordable solar power to your county, including X% of low-income households. So if you live in a rural county and you're focused on solar as opposed to wind, or either way, or bring affordable wind power to, your rural county, and then that energy will directly impact low-income households that have been identified in the community. So you can start there and work your way backwards. So you've identified in your community that you have the land, that you have a network of developers who can bring either solar or wind to your community. You have the interest, and, you know, say you have the funding. And then the activities, so you're getting to implementation, is you're siting that wind farm, you're securing the permits, you're working with people who might own that land to make sure that that, you know, is getting stood up. And then you're getting to your outputs. So you're generating energy at this point, and then you're starting to track how that renewable source is creating community benefits. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the point at, like, in which KPIs do, again, enter the conversation. So how are you tracking if you're being successful in each stage here? So in your planned work phase, you know, say you're starting from 0. And you're starting with a goal and a vision in mind. So I want to stand up a solar program in my community so I can benefit, you know, people in my community with, you know, low cost energy and, you know, create positive impacts for those in low income households. Just to start there, you've got to create a network of vendors, it's really about your network. You know, who do you know? Who is also engaged in this work? This can start from local, state government. It's not just about commercial vendors. Understanding how much money you need. You know, do you have a funding plan? Do you have funding? You know, we talked about this a little bit earlier. And then for activities, the number of homes that you have identified that could benefit from this work. So you can track that number. So we talked about this before with the county case study. You know, they cited the number of households that they wanted to hit. I'm sure that number wasn't made up, but, you know, they were able to decide that 27,000 homes was the place to start. And then at the end of this, you can decide if you've, you know, based on that goal that you've set, if you've achieved it. And then as you get to intended results, so if you have 27,000 homes, whether you're serving them through a farm or you're serving them through rooftop solar, you know, did you hit that installation number? Did you get there? Did you get there by serving them with the amount of kilowatts that you needed to, or megawatts? And then for outcome measures over time, so this is not just in the short term, but going forward, over time, did you see spillover effects from this type of work? Did you see that more people were adopting solar? Did you see people use electric vehicles? I don't know, like there can be more to track beyond that if you're focused on a clean energy community. And then again, if you're focused on lowering the energy bills in your community as well, you know, you can track the decreased cost in energy, or track, if people volunteer the information, how much their energy bills decreased. And then again, as you get to the long-lasting impacts of this program, say your community becomes a full solar community, or energy efficiency has changed, as I said, into other impacts of their life, like transportation has changed, mobility has changed, commercial, public health, like clean energy is not just about a home, it's about the community. So there's a bigger, longer lasting impact. Next slide. So I'm happy to go back to the slides if you want to look through again, but I just wanted to open this up to conversation, questions or comments about the logic model. Can we go back one more slide? And I might throw Emily off just a little bit here, but like I said, like you can kind of come at this like it's like a 2D, you know, roadmap, but it's like 3D concept. So many things can pop into your head when you're looking at a logic model. And there are different ways to set up a logic model, but this very top piece in blue and green, this is typically how it flows. But you can come at it, like I said, from any entry point. So, you know, say, trying to think of a good example. Say there was an opportunity in a local community to start a pilot program, and you had interested parties, so you had interested stakeholders, but you didn't really have the inputs. So you have a lot of like-minded, interested people who are ready to engage in these activities of creating more solar, you know, siting more solar on rooftops in communities. But again, you have interest, but you need finance, you need homes that are interested in doing this. You need to do the inputs piece first. You can work backwards. You can go there and go, well, hey, what do we need to actually get this off the ground? We have interest, but we need to get this off the ground. Or you have interest and you have the resources, but you're not getting interest from the community. How are you actually going to deliver for this community if they're not demonstrating interest? So maybe you need to pivot. Maybe you need to go back and figure out how to reapproach the community. Maybe they don't even know that there might be like a pilot program that could help them get solar. Or maybe there aren't a level of incentives there yet to push for that. Suzanne, I see you have a question. Does the logic model include defining questions, specifics below where you have examples and relevant measures? So you're asking, does the logic model typically break down like this? No, we've written this out so that we could just provide examples. If we I don't know if you mind hopping to there's a future slide. It's slide 44.
The DOE one?
No, I unhid it. If you go to slide 44, it just shows a very clean slate logic model. I just wanted to show you what that looks like. Okay. Suzanne, so this is sort of what it looks like, tabula rasa, and then the relevant measures is just a helpful way for you to also keep in mind how you're tracking towards these logic model areas. Does that make sense? But I do think, you know, and fully support you doing this, but you can use the slide that we were just on, which is slide 35, as a really good reference point. Because I think those questions are really helpful. You know, what resources do you need? So your inputs. What does the program plan to do with those inputs, the activities? What will your initiative deliver? Outputs. And then what are the changes you think that this initiative will bring, the outcomes? And then you have your long-term, you know, impact and vision for the program. Okay, so we can go back to slide 36. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, great. I think we're gonna, really dive deep into it now before our next exercise with Emily. So good to you, Emily.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of logic models and then some tips and tricks when you build them out. So at a high level, logic models are essentially just a helpful framework to outline the theory of change or the theory of your program. They can be helpful, as we've talked about, in defining KPIs and also in sort of communicating how your program works, what you're doing, how you're intending to achieve its goals to other stakeholders that you may need to be communicating with. I'll note a lot of government agencies and other organizations encourage use of logic models because they can be really helpful with this, especially not only with like ongoing performance management, but with program evaluations at the end of a project or a program, kind of looking back and seeing how it went. I mentioned before, we use these in every single program evaluation that I did at DOT. Other agencies and departments use them as well. The content on this slide we actually pulled from the DOE website. So some of the benefits that they mentioned here is, again, logic models are helpful in communicating kind of your program and how it works to people outside of the program in a very visual and concise way. It can help not only external stakeholders, but also your internal teams. Maybe folks within your organization that aren't as familiar with your program can help with communicating to those internal staff and get a common understanding of how the program's working and in some cases, kind of people's responsibilities. And then again, it's a tool to help attribute outcomes to the program in a very clear way. So DOE, they typically suggest choosing a small set of clear and measurable KPIs within the logic model. There's no right number, no one perfect number in terms of how many measures you should be collecting. It should be probably like more than one or two. Does not have to be a list of 20. So measure kind of what makes sense and what's meaningful and what you have data for. It doesn't have to be a huge list of metrics. All right, next slide. There are some, so we pulled in some leading practices on logic models. The items listed here are kind of most relevant to when you're communicating or sharing your logic model with other stakeholders, both within and your organization and externally. I'll highlight a couple of them. So this is good in any sort of communication, but just using plain language. So keeping the language really simple, really concise, avoiding technical jargon or acronyms. If you do use an acronym, spell it out. And just making it so that somebody who might not be as familiar with the program can pick it up and understand what's going on pretty clearly. The logic model itself is a visual, but it can certainly be supplemented with other visuals. So whether it's other diagrams, infographics, flow charts to really map out a bit more extensively how the program works. Can be helpful to supplement with things like that. It can also be helpful to supplement the logic model with more context about the program and its goals and its outcomes. So as you think about it, it's just sort of like one tool, one framework, one visual, but in communicating the program to other stakeholders, it can still be helpful to add additional context and supplementary data. The fourth one I think is really important. So it, I wouldn't develop a logic model alone. I would collaborate with your team and don't be afraid to pull in other stakeholders that touch the program too, to the development. I think collaboration helps get the logic model to a place where it's much more comprehensive. You're sort of thinking about all of the impacts. making sure that the logic model captures the program from a lot of different angles. So I think collaboration is key. Again, getting feedback from stakeholders on the logic model is important, and make sure it captures different stakeholders who might be involved in different parts of the programs, their perspectives. And then I mentioned this before, but logic models are really, really helpful and often used in program evaluations, either at the end of a program or, sometimes you do it in the middle of a program. And so if you do decide to develop a logic model and there's an evaluation at the end, use it in that evaluation. It could be helpful to sort of like set the scene for what the program was, what you intended to happen, and then communicating kind of what the outcomes were. And we're doing a training on logic models today for those on your team that weren't able to join. And for those, if you do decide to do a logic model you would be collaborating with, it could be helpful just to make sure everybody's up to speed on how to do them. All right, next slide. Some other tips. I think Ryan covered a few of these. I'll just reinforce. You can really start at either side of the logic model. I know that we all think differently. And when I've done these in the past, you might start at the beginning and then kind of jump around. Oftentimes programs are very complex, and there might be kind of lots of activities going on that have kind of like parallel outcomes and impacts. And so sometimes it can be helpful to go activity by activity and kind of map out the theory of change for a given activity. So don't feel like there's one way to do these. I would, look at it as a holistic tool and kind of like approach it in the way that feels right to you and makes the most sense. Take a couple passes. Like I said, don't do it alone. You don't have to do it in one sitting. I think kind of taking a pass, sitting with it, coming back to it, collaborating with others is really the best way to make sure that you capture everything and you get the logic model really solid and comprehensive. And then the last piece I'll mention is logic models can be a living document. It does not have to be something that you develop and then you're beholden to it for the course of your project or program. Logic models can be living. It's okay to adjust them as your program evolves. Maybe the activities change a little bit. Maybe you decide to measure some different KPIs, or you are shifting how you're sort of thinking about success and outcomes. Update the logic model as you go. You can go to the next slide. All right, I believe next we are moving into another project exercise and working through a logic model together. Before we shift over to that activity, any other questions or thoughts or reactions on the logic model content? All right, I think we can move on.
Hi, sorry, my internet was being slow. So you all will recall some of this from before. So this was actually the case study that we were referring to. So in LA County, there was an energy upgrade program. So Los Angeles County was a participant in a statewide energy upgrade California program. The goal, and I believe Kita is no longer with us here, but she called out a lot of good pieces here. The actual full SMART goal was by 2029, create X more clean energy jobs and reduce aggregate greenhouse gas emissions by X% by supporting growth of a contractor network to promote and conduct energy and resource saving retrofits of housing in LA County. Going back to the KPIs that they had set out for themselves, so they were going to retrofit 27,000 single family homes, reduce annual purchased energy consumption, create jobs, and then reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a certain amount. Go to the next slide. So in working through this from the SMART goal and keeping the KPIs in mind, let's work through how we might lay out the first part of a logic model. So the planned work. So we have our questions here. So for our planned work, our inputs are: what resources do we need to run this specific program? So like we had before with the planned goal at the top, let's envision that this SMART goal is also at the top here. So from working there, you know, what resources do we need here to do this work? And you could start anywhere again. Feel free to come off mute or put anything in the chat. Okay, so let's think of it this way. But so by 2029, we're going to create more jobs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by supporting a contractor network that will implement retrofits, solar retrofits. So what are our inputs here? Do we have an inventory of homes to work with here? Do we have an established contractor network? There are no right or wrong answers here. I'm sort of asking like objective questions, but
Do we have financing?
do you have financing? Let's say in this specific instance that we do, because the LA County has part of this program. So we're just gonna, that's a freebie, I guess. So let's get that in there.
Okay.
I feel like I'm probably getting a little too technical in my mind of just the example. I'm thinking about the example too much and not necessarily thinking about the actual thing at hand.
I think you're better off just saying what you think. It's okay if you get technical.
Yeah, I just like don't really understand like how they would like I in theory I understand how supporting growth of a contractor network could reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but unless they have like a deliverable program of saying, okay, here's our contractor network, and then here's our, you know, low income or medium income housing, unless they have a, like, this goal doesn't show that they have a plan to actually connect the contractor network to the local individuals. And so I guess like this specific example, I'm confused about how they're going to create or reduce aggregate greenhouse gas emissions just by saying we're going to support a network. But unless they're like connecting their network to their customers or like stuffing their bills and saying, okay, hey, we are contracting with the new contractor and they're going to do low, no cost home energy upgrades. Like unless they're planning on doing that, like I don't understand how, like the goal is great, but
yeah,
where's
okay.
the meat?
Yeah.
Griffin, I think that's
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I think that's really great. And I think you should feel free to think about that, especially as you work through this, because a SMART goal might not be that explicit because it can be higher level. So I think you're already coming at this from an activities perspective. So you're in this whether you think so or not. So you're talking about an activity of connecting that contractor network to, can you say that again?
To the residents, to the people. How do
Okay.
you connect the thing to the people? So I guess, I mean, going back to the inputs, you would want to, if they don't already have if LA County didn't already have a contractor network, they'd want to begin by building that out. And so if I were working in LA County as a sustainability coordinator or whatever, I would reach out to contractors who do home energy upgrades and basically say, are you familiar with the technology that we're seeking to reduce carbon emissions? And do you have experience working in low and moderate income neighborhoods and working with maybe novel financing models as something that might be a part of this specific project? I also think that they'll probably need, they should have someone at the county who's like the person that's running the program, right? So there should be a dedicated person that is responsible for connecting and networking with the contractors, and then is also responsible for maybe working with LA Department of Water and Power to do bill stuffing and that kind of leads into the activities piece. But yeah.
So you're thinking about staffing. So staffing is really important. And then I think even embedded in some of those ideas, Griffin, you're also talking about the activities. So Crystal, I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to point out that this case study is exactly as presented, but there's a link on the slide before to the complete marketing plan that they had put together for this. So Griffin, I was going to make sure people were aware that's there. It has very good examples, but you're making a point. You need a marketing plan. You need a community outreach plan to get these people together.
Great. And I think that also would be involved in the activities piece. And to bring it back to...
So I would say maybe they need a marketing firm or they need marketing people in their staff, right? That gets back to your staffing situation.
I don't think I think it could be an either or. It depends on what their resources are. But an outreach, if we just, for the purposes of this exercise, we could just say outreach plan.
Yeah.
And then I think within something like an outreach plan, you need to have your KPIs. So how many contractors are you intending to reach? How many do you need to reach? How are you going to figure out the number of homes that, like who are the people that you're intending to serve with this program? And is there a number tied to that? I think these are a little more related to the activities, these KPIs. But financing, is there a dollar amount beyond, or even like we talked about, is there is there a parameter in this program for money that you might need to raise on your own? Is there a match or some other kind of requirement? And then you might even need to create a staffing plan as part of those inputs. Emily, is there anything here we might want to call out as we get towards like activities? I know, I feel like Griffin's spoken pretty plainly about like the planning piece of this. But as we're about to get towards implementation, are there any activities or inputs? We don't have anything in activities at the moment, but are any activities or inputs we might be missing?
These are the big ones. Yeah, usually the financing staff are important ones that'll often appear in pretty much every logic model. Sometimes we'll include things like policies or guidance that are relevant to the program. It's hard to say if that would be relevant in this situation because there's not a ton of information, but sometimes you can think about some of the guidance and regulations too.
As an input?
As an input, yep.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I wonder if maybe in their KPIs, they're maybe already identifying that there's not enough capacity within the existing network of contractors in Los Angeles to retrofit 27,000 single family homes by 2029. It seems like they're saying that they recognize that they need to create 3,200 jobs. And in the creation of those jobs, that is going to help them get their KPI of retrofitting the 27,000 homes. I wonder, so maybe like an input would be, or maybe not an input, more this is getting more to the activities, which maybe my bad for being a little too excited to get to that. But maybe there's a training program that the county could support to train new contractors in low and moderate income energy efficiency retrofits in single and multifamily homes. So like that seems like one activity that would go towards these goals, is a training program. And then saying, you know, essentially, we're going to do this training program. And then at the same time, we're going to reach out to our, you know, customers, our energy customers or whatever. And we're going to say, here's a list. If you as a contractor participate in our contractor training program, you'll get added to an official contractor list that will send out to all of our 27,000 single family homes that we want to retrofit. And we're going to send them a whole envelope that's going to have this resource list. It's going to have a funding mechanism, whether it's a grant, a rebate from the utility, something of that matter. And then basically they can go to a contractor and say, we can guarantee that you're going to get X amount of work from it by participating in this training and by bringing on new staff. We can guarantee that you're going to get, you know, there's going to be jobs for you if you are a part of this.
Thank you, Griffin. Yeah. Is it okay? Great. And then, you know, we have just, you know, we have like the create 3,200 jobs. So I think, again, like you're still investing in training programs and outreach. And then I think there's probably even more work beyond that to, if they can be connected with those contractors or identify other means to get involved in, other ways to get involved in the sector following the training. We can go to the next slide.
One more question that I had that is on this slide, or maybe it's on this slide too. For the building stock, reducing it by 36,287 metric tons, would one of the inputs for that be a greenhouse gas emissions inventory that the county has done to actually have a baseline for, like, because it's great to say we want to reduce it by this much, but what are they reducing from? That's maybe one other thing I'd add.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Can we get that in there?
I think I just lost inventory. Of the resources we need, right?
Okay, great. Move to the next slide. Okay, so we have thought through, you know, the planned work, and now we're trying to get to intended results. And, you know, I think we could probably zoom out a little bit from the KPIs to figure this out, but, you know, what are we intending to deliver? You know, what are the types of services that we're going to be delivering with our goal in mind? So, Griffin, you've talked about building a contractor network. outreach mechanisms. It's going to yield construction. It's going to create a larger network of contractor services, and then also training. So it might result in more jobs.
Maybe like a replicable model for others to use, right? If this program has success in Los Angeles County, there, the whole thing, start to finish contract network outreach program implementation could be replicated by other counties.
Is that a replica? Is that an outcome or an output?
I think that would be a little more of an outcome. So, what do we hope will be a midterm impact of this, or a short term or a midterm impact of this work? So it's a good call on the replicable model.
Maybe increasing energy literacy would be a middle one, because if you're asking a lower income or a middle income person to consider that they might have 20% energy reductions available in their house, that might force them to look at their energy bills even just a little bit, and so that could be kind of mid one.
No, absolutely. I love that. And then, that literacy, and I think even just understanding of these types of programs leads to broader awareness about opportunities to get renewable energy, or be more energy conscious at home.
Is that an output?
That'd be an outcome. I do think you could speak to workforce, a localized workforce, or a local specialized workforce, I should say. Sorry. I think that's also an outcome.
Not directly said on here, and I don't know where it would fit into any of this, but maybe I guess it wouldn't fit in if it's just focused on retrofits. But I mean, maybe this would be considered a retrofit, is like heat pumps for heating and cooling. I had heard on another webinar or training that something like 40 or 50 or even more than that, maybe 70% of the heating in California is from natural gas. And that really shocked me as someone from the upper Midwest. Like, in my head, for some reason, I thought that heating in California, this liberal state, not too big thermal loads, would already all be on heat pumps. And so I don't know if that's a specific thing for this thing to add to, but like, you could probably achieve a greater than 20% reduction in energy use if you just install heat pumps in all these homes, not even considering weatherization retrofits or replacing doors and windows and that kind of stuff.
That's really interesting, because I feel like that could also fall into like a program impact, because what if you're learning in the course of this work, as you're noting, Griffin, like, it is surprising. So while the focus here is on solar, is an inadvertent program impact of this that it can't just be solar. What else is the state of California, whether private, public, like, doing to diversify energy sources away from natural gas?
Right, and I think about like if you're putting solar on houses, the way to like optimize the solar energy and how it's used in your house is to have a really tight ceiling in your house and make sure that it's weatherized properly so that when you're heating and cooling it, you're not losing all that heating and cooling. And then also, you know, with heat pumps, obviously, if you go from natural gas heating to heating with a heat pump, then you can use your solar energy to heat and cool your house. And maybe you also have a battery storage thing because of the new net metering laws in California. So if you, maybe it's a more holistic approach where, yes, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by installing solar or supporting retrofits for like basic weatherization stuff. But if you take a more holistic, like whole home approach, you could experience much larger energy savings if you're doing weatherization and heat pumps and solar and energy storage, because then at that point, you're essentially just creating a grid tied little microgrid essentially that you could operate. And so many people have electric cars in California, like you might not even need to buy home storage. You can just plug in your Tesla and then there you go.
Yeah, no, and that's really great. And it actually leads me to wonder just, you know, as we're having this conversation, maybe an outcome of this or as part of your plan, you are two ways. You are constantly revisiting or consistently revisiting how you track success here. And then maybe at the end of this, there's opportunity for a strategic plan, or there's some way to come at this and say, hey, what works, what didn't work? Because I would also argue, I think even in your assumptions about California, like my assumptions there have also been disrupted before because technology changes, policy changes, incentives change, the market just, it changes. So how are you adjusting so by 2029, 5 years from now, that things are going to change. So how are you pivoting and adjusting? And maybe you're building that into this logic model, realizing that there are those types of changes.
Where would you like that, Ryan?
You know, it's funny. I do think it's a mixture of output. I think it's an outputs situation. And that can just be like biannual reporting or biannual strategic plan or, you know, strategic review. But either way, you know, you and then you can sort of benchmark between your activities and your outputs, you know, when you're going, I think if you go back to activities too, like that's sort of when you would establish that you're going to draft a biannual report, that sort of thing. And then let's just jump to the KPIs real quick. And then we'll show you the complete logic model.
After the break.
After the break. Okay. So if we could just zoom in a little bit, I don't know if we're able to do that.
Folks can individually zoom on their.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to call attention to like, not all logic models are the same. So this is actually an example from the Department of Energy. And you can see that they've sort of tilted it on a different axis. So you have inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes going down and sort of working your way down. So, you know, you have your funding, personnel, facilities, past results that might indicate that there's opportunity here. What are your activities here? So you're planning your program, you're developing and maintaining that infrastructure. So retaining those resources, staffing, operations, you're conducting research, developing technology or showcasing it. And then you're creating an infrastructure to go to market. And then you kind of go through your sort of agile feedback loop of development and continuing that process going until you actually hit the market, and then you have your outputs. And this kind of hits a broad swath of stakeholders. And then you have your outcomes. So how your technology might achieve your goal. And then far to the right, you have your impacts. So long term, the political environment might change because of what you're working on. Quality of proposals might improve. These are sort of things that will impact your work and, you know, what comes out long term. Are there any questions here? And again, this will be circulated with the materials.
And I'll just mention that was a 2010 logic model for their energy efficiency program.
Yeah. Yeah, and Suzanne, like I know you're noting that it's complicated. Like that is certainly a more rigorous logic model. And you know, we've provided you sort of like the basic concepts of what goes into that. But in that mantra of like it's a 2D layout for a 3D concept, you can make it as rigorous as you'd like. Like that sample logic model, you might have half of that, but you can still, nothing is stopping you from adding and adding and adding as long as it's relevant to the project and helping you. So
there are probably a lot of engineers who worked on that too and weren't going to be satisfied with less detail. So you have to take that in mind too. Again, one of the points was, it has to be developed to communicate with your stakeholders. So this one probably involved a lot of stakeholders who needed detail.
Yeah.